Ever wondered what would happen if Brian O'Connor swapped the driver's seat for the defendant's chair? Well, I did, and I spent my entire week watching the Fast and the Furious movie multiple times. And let me tell you, Brian is not taking the law too seriously. So how long would Brian be behind bars if the law ever caught up with him? Let's find out. So let's remember that Brian is technically a cop throughout this whole movie. But can we put everything he did under the claim of he did it not to blow his cover? Yeah, I don't think so. In literally the first scene where we see Brian, he's committing his first crime. To infiltrate Toretto's gang, he obviously needs to know how to drive a street racing car. He could have done this on some sort of racetrack, but Brian decides that it's a good idea to try it out on the streets of Los Angeles. To be fair, it's an empty street and he could only harm himself. Still, this counts as reckless driving and leads him to 90 days in jail and costs him a $1,000 fine. But that's not everything Brian does to infiltrate Dom's gang. Brian also visits the Toretto's cafe. He gets along a bit too well with Mia, according to Vince, and let's just say Vince doesn't like that. They get in a fight and throw some punches, but nothing too serious. I mean, they both stand up and could go for another round. Anyway, this is battery according to California law and could land him 6 months in prison. But I don't think Vince will press charges because in the end, Brian kinda saves his life. But I'll get into that later. On to the next shocking thing. My mind was blown by this fact. In the first Fast and Furious movie, Brian only raced twice in an illegal street race. Early in the movie and at the end of the movie. Yeah, crazy, right? Before starting my Fast and Furious marathon, I thought they would race all the time. Anyway, Brian's jail time for one race is 90 days, and he needs to pay a $1,000 fine, making it a total of 180 days in prison and a $2,000 fine. Also, using nitrous oxide is illegal and costs him another $250. Oh, and his vehicle will be impounded for 60 days. But then again, his car kinda got destroyed. Before his car was blown up, he picked up Dominic, who ran off so they could both get away from the cops. I gotta admit, good way to become friends with a criminal. Anyway, what I questioned throughout the entire movie, where the hell are Dominic's feet? During the race Brian was in before, the bottom plate of the car came off. So, is Dominic lifting his feet up all the time or what? Anyway, let's get back to the serious part. They ran and evaded police. And this reckless evading police with injury thing could land them up to 5 years in jail and a $10,000 fine. But driving isn't the only thing Brian sucks at, according to the law. I mean, he looks like he knows what to do with a car. Still, because of his blind spot for Dominic, Brian, still undercover for the LAPD and FBI, thinks Hector has something to do with the truck hijackings. I kinda understand because Hector did order a large amount of high-performance car parts.
So what's up? What do you need?
What's up, man? I'm gonna need you to hook me up. 3 of everything. I made a list.
But then again, you can't just break into someone's garage, not even as a police officer. This is what we call trespassing, and Brian actually does it twice. Just moments later, he breaks into Johnny Tran's garage with Dom and Vince. Yeah, okay, he kinda had no choice. But it is still not allowed. He could have booked them. So I, the cinema judge, sentence him to another year in prison and a $2,000 fine. So, you know, as a police officer, you have some kind of advantages and have some resources a regular person doesn't have. Therefore, it's important that you handle those correctly, right? Well, Brian doesn't think that apparently because he calls in police resources to track Dominic and his crew. But he didn't do it to arrest the guy or anything. This misuse of resources might land him close to Dominic, but it also lands him in prison for 4 years. And remember when I talked about Brian saving Vince? Let me explain this a bit further. During the Race Wars event, Jesse loses his car to Johnny Tran and ran off.
Where's Jesse going?
Just raced Tran for slips.
Of course, Tran didn't like that, and to fix things, Dom decides to do another truck heist. Obvious, right? So the crew is missing Jesse for the heist. Unfortunately, this truck driver is prepared. and things go south for the crew. Brian is racing towards Vince in order to save his life, but while doing so, he's pulling off crazy stunts on a public road. This is another reckless driving charge for Brian, but because it's not the first time, I'll sentence him to 6 months in prison, a $1,000 fine, and of course, a license suspension. Meanwhile, the truck heist went wrong and Johnny Tran is still pissed. Tran decides to go to Dominic's house in order to find Jesse. Jesse arrives at the Toretto residence just moments before Tran gets there. What a coincidence, right? Tran shoots and kills Jesse, and Brian and Dom start to chase him. Tran shoots at Brian, but obviously misses. He is the bad guy after all, and because Brian is kind of the hero of the movie, Brian shoots Johnny in the back, which kills Tran. Since Johnny Tran shot first, I call this self-defense and won't charge Brian for this. But the next thing, I can't dismiss. Like I said earlier, there are 2 illegal street races Brian participates in. This last one ends up with Dominic's father's car being totally destroyed. Not by the train, but by the truck. Looks kinda serious, but if we look at Dom, it was nothing less than a big scare.
That's not what I had in mind.
And he wasn't even wearing a seatbelt. When he hears the sound of the police sirens in the background, Brian gives Dominic his car keys, allowing Dom to get away.
I know what you're doing.
I owe you a 10-second car.
As a police officer, which he still is, this is the release of a suspect and is directly undermining law enforcement operations. This lands Brian with another 4 years in prison. Happy end for Dominic, not such a happy end for Brian. Let's sum up all the felonies he's committed. So this first movie alone would land Brian 15.25 years in prison. Oh, and he needs to pay up a $16,250 fine. Should I explore all the Fast and Furious movies and find out how long Brian actually is going to prison for? Let me know down below, and I'll catch you in the next one.